Story 1. The Girl at Table 7. Back in the early 90s, I worked as a waitress to help pay my way through an associate degree in business. It wasn't glamorous and the pay was a meager $7.25 an hour, but it got me by. Most days were uneventful, a blur of orders, spilled drinks, and forced smiles. But one night, something happened that I'll never forget. It started like any other shift. I was busy clearing tables when an unkempt couple walked in, accompanied by a teenage girl. There was something about them that caught my attention. The couple looked rough, clothes wrinkled, hair messy, but the girl stood out in a way I couldn't quite put into words. She had a tired look in her eyes, like someone carrying a weight far too heavy for her age. I seated them at a table, handed them menus, and went about my work. A few minutes later, as I passed by with another order, the girl's fork fell to the floor. I picked it up, handed it back, and as I did, she grabbed my hand, firmly. I thought it was odd, but brushed it off. Maybe she was just clumsy or nervous. Not long after, I passed by their table again. This time, the fork dropped again. A coincidence, I thought, bending down to pick it up. But when I handed it back to her, she squeezed my hand again. This time, it was tighter. By the third time it happened, my gut was telling me something wasn't right. Her grip grew firmer each time, and by the fourth, I could feel the silent desperation behind it. It wasn't an accident anymore. This girl was trying to tell me something. But what? Eventually, the group finished their meal and left. I went to clear their table, and that's when I saw it. Underneath one of the plates was a crumpled napkin with shaky handwriting that stopped me cold. "Help me! Call the police!" My heart dropped. 1,000 questions ran through my mind. Was she kidnapped? Were those her captors? Why didn't I realize it sooner? I couldn't focus on anything else for days. That girl haunted my thoughts, her desperate grip replaying in my mind over and over. Then, something clicked. She looked familiar. Too familiar. I racked my brain, piecing together the memory. That's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. She looked just like Antoinette Calladito, the missing girl from New Mexico. Her face, her frame. It all matched the description I'd seen in news reports. The realization sent chills down my spine. Antoinette had been missing for years, and here she was sitting in my restaurant trying to reach out for help, and I hadn't done anything. Every night as I lay in bed, the guilt eats away at me. I should have acted. I should have called someone. I could have saved her. Years later, I learned that Antoinette's mother, Penny, passed away in 1999. I've always had a nagging suspicion that Penny knew more than she let on. Interviews with her didn't sit right. She never seemed truly concerned. Could she have sold her own daughter? The thought makes me sick, but it's a possibility I can't ignore. To this day, no one knows what happened to Antoinette. She's still listed as a missing person, though law enforcement believes she's no longer alive. I hope, wherever she is, she's finally at peace. I hope her pain is over. But I'll carry the weight of that night with me forever. Story 2. It all started with a stare. Being an exchange student from Mexico in a new country was exciting, but it came with its share of adjustments. That morning, I grabbed my bag and headed to the bus stop, ready for another day of school. The chill in the air made everything feel sharper, more vivid, almost eerie. As I stood waiting for the bus, I spotted a lone coyote lingering on the other side of the street. Its yellow eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. We stared at each other, neither of us moving. It wasn't fear, I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something about that coyote didn't feel natural. Then the bus horn blared, jolting me out of the trance. When I looked back, the coyote was gone. It hadn't walked away, hadn't run. It had just vanished. Weird, but I brushed it off. Animals can be skittish, right? The bus doors swung open. "Hey, Francisco, you ready for the New Year's party tonight?" the driver asked with a grin. "Yeah," I replied, stepping on, "but did you see a coyote across the street before you pulled up?" The driver frowned, his brows furrowing. "Coyote. Didn't see any coyote." I sat down, trying to shake the uneasy feeling. How could no one else see it? I spent the bus ride convincing myself I'd imagined the whole thing. But things didn't stop there. During recess, I was watching the soccer field when a deer wandered out from the trees. It wasn't unusual to see wildlife around, but then it turned its head and locked eyes with me. The same unblinking, penetrating stare as the coyote. A loud pop from a student's juice box snapped me out of it. I looked back, and just like the coyote, the deer was gone. This couldn't be real. Animals don't just disappear into thin air. My heart raced as I bolted to the nearest bathroom and locked myself in a stall. The chatter of students outside felt distant, muffled. I sat there, trying to calm down. That's when I heard it. "Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream." The sing-song voice of a child echoed through the bathroom. The sound grew louder, each word dripping with a distorted sweetness, like a lullaby gone wrong. "Merrily, merrily, life's but a dream." The voice stopped just outside my stall. Then came the scratching, long fingernails scraping against the door. My breath caught as I peered through the tiny gap. Something white flashed past the crack, and my stomach twisted into knots. I barely made it through the day. Back home, I tried to shake off the unease. Tonight was New Year's Eve, a time to celebrate, not dwell on creepy encounters. After a shower, I felt that familiar prickle on the back of my neck. Someone, or something, was watching me. Through the frosted bathroom window, I could hear quick, frantic steps outside. Gravel crunched, rocks scattered. I didn't dare look. The evening came, and the house filled with family and friends. Laughter and music drowned out my anxiety. "Francisco, come here," my mom's voice called. "What is it?" I yelled back. "Francisco, I need you upstairs." Her tone grew sharper, more urgent. Confused, I made my way upstairs. The voice seemed to come from the attic, but why would my mom be up there? My stomach churned as I pulled down the attic ladder. Climbing up, I switched on a flashlight and swept the beam around the room. That's when I saw it. Crouched in the corner was a tall, emaciated figure, its pale skin stretched tightly over its bones. When the light hit its face, it turned towards me. Sunken eyes glowed red, and its mouth twisted into a grotesque smile filled with needle-sharp teeth. "Row, row, row your boat," it sang, the distorted voice dripping with malice. I scrambled down the ladder, heart pounding, but I slipped and fell onto my back with a thud. The creature's claws scratched at the edge of the opening as it tried to follow. Summoning every ounce of courage, I kicked the ladder back into place, locking it. It screamed, a sound that seemed to rattle the walls, but it couldn't escape. Later, I pieced it all together. The coyote, the deer, the singing voice. It had all been the same thing, stalking me, watching me. I have one message for that creature. Let's not meet again. Story 3. The night my name was called. It was a little past 11 p.m. and I had just gotten home. At 25, I was busy balancing life, work, and everything in between, so I was tired and ready to call it a night. I headed to the bathroom to wash up, my mind on autopilot. That's when I heard it. A male voice, clear as day, calling my name. It wasn't a random shout or a whisper. It was my name, spoken in a way that demanded attention, almost as if someone needed me. Without thinking, I replied, "What?" I assumed it was my dad on the other side of the door, but after a moment of silence, I realized something wasn't right. I opened the bathroom door, expecting to see him standing there. Nothing. My dad's bedroom was right next to the bathroom, so I peeked in. There he was, fast asleep. I even called out to him a couple of times just to be sure. No response. A chill ran down my spine. Something or someone had called my name, and it wasn't my dad. I couldn't shake the feeling, so I retreated to my room and tried to push it out of my mind. I turned on some light-hearted comedy skits to distract myself, but the unease lingered. About 20 minutes in, another strange feeling washed over me. This one less fearful, more urgent. It was as if a switch had flipped, and suddenly I felt compelled to check in on my guy friends. It didn't make any sense, but the feeling was so strong that I grabbed my phone and started reaching out. I messaged all of them, even an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone was fine, no emergencies, no crises, just the usual, "Hey, I'm good, thanks for checking in." The odd vibe didn't completely leave me, but it softened into a quiet worry. I eventually managed to fall asleep. For years, that night stayed with me, a strange and unsettling memory without a clear answer. Fast forward 3 years. Out of the blue, I got a call from an ex. We hadn't spoken in a long time, and he was apologizing for how things ended when I was 21. He explained his reasons, asked for forgiveness, and we talked about how we'd both moved on. During the conversation, that night in August 2015 popped into my mind. Could there be a connection? I decided to ask. "Did anything happen to you in August 2015? I asked, unsure if he'd even remember. He went silent. After a long pause, he asked why I was bringing it up. I told him about the voice that called my name that night, how it had unsettled me, and the strange urge I had to check on my friends. His response stopped me cold. "That's the month my dad passed away," he said quietly. I was in a really dark place, thinking about my life here in Hong Kong, and I was thinking about us. What could have been if things had gone differently? If I had stayed in Canada with you? A wave of emotion hit me, and suddenly everything started to make sense. Or at least, as much as it could. I don't know how to explain it, but I believe what I experienced was a spiritual connection, a kind of message that transcended time and distance. He and I always had a bond that felt deeper than just friendship or romance. It was as if we had known each other in another life, or were tied together by some unseen force. Even now, I can't fully describe it, but it felt like part of a greater design, like we were part of the same soul family, destined to cross paths in this life. That night, I believe I received a spiritual call, carried across energy or some unknown plane. Whether it came from him or from something beyond us, I'll never truly know. But after that phone call, the mystery felt solved, and I was finally able to move on. To this day, I've never heard my name called like that again, but I've learned to trust my instincts and to always answer, just in case it's something that truly matters.